No one expected Jamie Thornton to return to Yorkshire a changed man. After years in the British Army and a final punishing deployment in Afghanistan, he found himself standing at the edge of Thornton Farm, a place that looked far smaller than he remembered as a boy. The gate creaked open in his hand. Cold wind sliced through the empty fields, tugging at his jacket. Beyond the battered fence, grass bent in ragged patches where sheep once grazed, and the farmhouse, once painted bright cream, looked faded, with peeling shutters and windows like blank eyes watching him. He paused on the gravel drive, breathing in the smells of mud and wood smoke, old hay, the distant tang of rain. Each step felt heavier, carrying the burden of years and the ghosts of friends he'd left behind. Jamie's boots crunched across weeds poking up through broken stone. The barn door hung off its hinges, flapping in the wind. Everything looked abandoned, forgotten by time and by the world. Yet this was his home now, inherited after his father's sudden heart attack last autumn. He dragged his duffel bag onto the porch, keys jangling in his shaking hand. He could still picture his father sitting right there, boots propped up, whittling a piece of wood, calling him kiddo with a sly grin. Now only silence greeted him. He stepped inside, flipping the light switch. Nothing. The electricity had been off for weeks. A musty chill seeped from the stone walls. Boxes crowded the hall. He set his bag down and closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sound of the wind fill the empty house. Night fell quickly in the Yorkshire countryside. Clouds rolled in, painting the sky a bruised purple. Jamie rummaged through drawers until he found a half-melted candle, setting it on the kitchen table. Shadows danced across faded wallpaper, revealing cracks and water stains. He poured himself a glass of tap water, staring at his reflection in the glass. Short-cropped brown hair, a thin scar above his eyebrow, eyes that seemed older than 31 years. Sitting alone in the kitchen, Jamie listened to the wind howl across the moors. Doubt crept in. What was he doing here? Could he really fix this place? The farm was barely holding together. Most of the fields were empty. The old tractor sat rusting under a tarpaulin. Yet something inside him, stubborn and raw, refused to let go. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the memory of his father's calloused hands. But he wasn't ready to walk away. He grabbed a flashlight and stepped out onto the porch, pulling his jacket tighter as the night grew colder. In the distance, the hills rolled dark and silent, broken only by the outline of ancient stone fences and a single leafless tree clawing at the sky. As he walked the boundary of the land, the old gateposts leaned at strange angles, warning him of years of neglect. Jamie's breath steamed in the cold air. He tried not to think about Afghanistan, about his squad, about things he couldn't talk about, even if he wanted to. There was a comfort in the routine, checking the fences, making sure the barn was secure, shining his flashlight over the empty stables where his mother once kept her ponies. The wind whistled through the broken boards, rattling an old horseshoe nailed above the door. For a moment, Jamie stood there in the dark, gripping the handle of the flashlight until his knuckles turned white. Everything felt so far away. His army life, the noise and chaos of war, the certainty of orders and missions. Here, he was just another broken piece of the past. Suddenly, a low whinny floated through the air, so faint he wondered if he'd imagined it. He stopped, listening. Another whimper, this one desperate, carried by the wind from the far end of the field near the stone wall. Jamie frowned. There hadn't been any animals on the property for months, not since the last sheep were sold. Heart pounding, he crossed the yard, boots slipping in the mud, flashlight beam trembling in his hand. As he neared the old paddock, the cries grew louder, soft, scared, almost pleading. The grass was overgrown, brambles snagging at his jeans. He followed the sounds to the far edge of the property, where the fence was hidden beneath tangled thorns. The beam of his flashlight flickered, then caught on something. A flash of pale brown, then a pair of wide, terrified eyes. Jamie's heart lurched. 3 small ponies, shaggy, wild, their coats matted and filthy, were tangled in a cruel mess of wire strung low between the posts. One tried to rear back, but the wire bit into its leg, drawing a thin line of blood. Another lay half-collapsed, sides heaving, while the third trembled, pressing against the others for comfort. Their breaths came in fast, frightened bursts. He dropped to his knees, hands shaking as he fumbled for his pocket knife. "Easy now," he murmured, voice low and steady. "I'm not going to hurt you. Hold on." The ponies jerked at his approach, whites of their eyes showing. Jamie worked fast, sawing at the wire, careful not to startle them more. The wind picked up, rattling the fence and whipping his hair into his eyes. He cursed under his breath, cutting through the last strand. The biggest of the 3, dark gray with a white blaze on its nose, stumbled as the wire fell away. But Jamie caught its head, steadying it. Its breath was hot and frantic against his palm. "You're all right now. You're safe." The smallest pony nuzzled the bigger one's side, while the third stood on trembling legs, testing its weight. Jamie inspected their wounds, raw, but not fatal. He tore a strip from his old shirt and wrapped it around the worst cut, whispering calm words as he worked. For a moment, time stood still. The only sounds were the pony's ragged breaths, the wind, and Jamie's heart hammering in his chest. He looked at the animals, lost, scared, but alive. Somehow, in the moonlit darkness, surrounded by the wreckage of his father's farm, Jamie felt something shift inside him. These ponies needed him. Maybe, he realized, he needed them just as much. He rose slowly, voice rough as gravel. "Come on, let's get you out of the cold." He led them one by one toward the barn, the 3 ponies limping at his side, trusting him because they had no one else. Behind them, the fields stretched empty and endless, the farmhouse a faint light against the night. Inside the barn, Jamie cleared a stall, spreading fresh straw with an energy he hadn't felt in months. He filled a bucket with water, coaxed the ponies to drink, and wrapped them in old blankets. They stood close together, eyes watching his every move. He stayed with them until the candle burned low, talking softly, promising things he didn't know if he could deliver. But in that small circle of light, with the wind howling outside and 3 battered ponies huddled together, Jamie felt hope flicker, tiny, stubborn, refusing to die. For the first time since coming home, he wasn't alone. The cold Yorkshire dawn crept in through the gaps in the barn walls, painting everything in shades of gray and blue. Jamie awoke with a start, stiff and shivering, curled on an old hay bale with a horse blanket thrown across his shoulders. For a split second, he thought he was back in the barracks, the wind rattling loose sheet metal outside, boots lined up by the door. Then he saw the ponies, 3 sets of curious eyes staring at him in the pale morning light, and remembered everything. He sat up slowly, bones aching. The ponies clustered together in the straw, wary but less panicked than the night before. Jamie's mind raced. What should he do next? Should he call someone? The law was clear about livestock, and these animals must belong to someone. Yet something about their condition, the desperate way they'd struggled in the wire, made him hesitate. He knelt down, reaching out his hand, letting the biggest one sniff his fingers. Its nose was soft, warm, twitching with nervous energy. "All right," he muttered, glancing at the muddy bandage wrapped around its foreleg. "Let's see what we're dealing with here." He stood and grabbed the flashlight, even though the sun had begun to climb over the distant hills. Moving carefully, Jamie inspected the 3 ponies, checking their wounds, murmuring reassurances, letting them know they weren't alone. He found deep grooves on their legs where the wire had bitten in, and mud caked in their tangled manes. He thought of his mother, how she'd brushed her old mare every morning, humming softly as the horse leaned into her touch. For a moment, a lump caught in his throat. Jamie shook it off and focused on the task at hand. He opened a battered first aid kit, found a roll of gauze, and worked methodically to clean and dress the wounds. The smallest pony flinched, but Jamie moved slowly, careful not to spook it. "It's all right. Easy now. I got you." He searched for any sign of a brand or tag, something that would identify where they'd come from. There was nothing, only wild, matted coats and frightened eyes. He decided to leave the barn door open just a crack so the ponies could see the yard, but not slip out and vanish. Jamie fetched buckets of fresh water and a scoop of oats from the storage shed, pouring them into the trough and watching the ponies sniff the food with growing curiosity. By mid-morning, the wind had died down, leaving the farm wrapped in a rare hush. Jamie set about cleaning the rest of the barn, pitching out old straw, scrubbing buckets, clearing cobwebs from the corners. He kept one eye on the ponies as he worked, noting how the biggest one, the gray with the white blaze, watched him closely, ears flicking with every move. A sudden noise startled all of them. A high, thin cry from the far side of the fence. Jamie's heart leapt. He dropped the pitchfork and jogged to the yard, scanning the fields. Only a pair of crows lifted off from the gatepost, squawking at his approach. He breathed out, realizing how on edge he'd become since his return. The silence of civilian life was so different from the world he'd known, where danger could come at any time, from any direction. Back in the barn, the ponies had started to move around more confidently. The smallest, a tawny brown with a star-shaped mark on its forehead, nuzzled Jamie's hand when he brought more water. The third, with a coat the color of autumn bracken, pawed at the straw, snorting as if to say, "I'm hungry. Hurry up." Jamie smiled, a rare, genuine grin breaking through his worry. He decided they needed names. It felt strange, but also necessary, as if calling them something would give them a place in this broken world. He studied each pony carefully, recalling the stories his mother used to tell. "You," he said, nodding at the big gray. "You look like you've seen a thing or two. How about Ash?" "Yeah, Ash. Strong, stubborn?" The gray pony twitched its ears as if in approval. Turning to the tawny one, Jamie thought of the wild ferns that covered the hills in summer. "You'll be Bracken, full of spirit, always moving." The little pony stamped the ground, eager for attention. Finally, the gentlest of the 3, the one who had let Jamie wrap her leg without fuss, stood quietly, eyes half closed. "You, Willow." The name rolled off his tongue, soft and soothing, just right for a creature so patient in her pain. Ash, Bracken, Willow. Jamie tried the names out loud, and the ponies looked up at him, as if understanding they'd been claimed. The rest of the day passed in a blur of chores and worry. Jamie made dozens of phone calls, to the local vet, the animal rescue, the council. No one reported any missing ponies. No one knew anything about Exmoor ponies running wild. When the vet arrived, a kind woman with gray hair and strong hands, she checked their wounds, took some notes, and promised to return with more medicine. "They've been through hell, these little ones," she said quietly. "You did right by bringing them in." As the sun set over the moors, Jamie led the ponies out of the barn and into a small paddock. The grass was thin, but it was enough for them to graze a little, tails swishing, heads bobbing in the evening light. He watched them for a long time, feeling the silence settle into something less oppressive, more peaceful. But the peace didn't last long. That night, as Jamie sat on the porch with a mug of tea, a sharp wind swept across the fields, rattling the windows. He pulled his jacket tight, staring into the darkness. Somewhere out there, someone had abandoned these ponies, left them to die, tangled in wire at the edge of the world. Jamie set his jaw. No, not on my watch. He rose, checked the locks on the barn, and circled the yard one more time. Flashlight beams slicing through the shadows. The moon hung low over the hills, silver and cold, casting everything in ghostly blue. He shivered, thinking of his father, of the farm in better days. He wondered what his old man would have said if he'd seen Jamie now, standing guard over 3 lost souls, refusing to turn his back. In the small hours before dawn, Jamie heard a noise outside, the sharp, nervous snorting of horses. He grabbed his boots, rushed to the barn. All 3 ponies were standing, alert, pressed against the gate. Ash pawed at the boards. Willow tossed her head. Bracken let out a little neigh. Jamie scanned the yard, heart pounding. Was someone out there? Was whoever left the ponies coming back? He found nothing. Only the restless wind and the steady, comforting sound of the ponies breathing in the darkness. He stayed with them until first light, promising in a whisper, "You're safe here. I won't let anything happen to you." As dawn broke, Jamie understood that his life would never be the same. He had a new purpose now. 3 fragile reasons to rebuild, to fight, to believe that even the loneliest places could hold hope. Jamie woke before sunrise, his mind already turning over the events of the last 2 days. The air in the farmhouse felt warmer somehow, the kind of warmth that comes not from the fire, but from having a reason to get out of bed. He threw on a flannel shirt and jeans, barely noticing the stiffness in his back as he hurried out the door, coffee in hand. The world outside was painted silver, dew hanging thick on every blade of grass, and in the distance, 3 little shapes grazed quietly in the paddock. He made his way to the fence, calling softly, "Ash, Bracken, Willow, morning, you 3?" To his delight, all 3 ponies looked up at the sound of their names. Bracken was first to approach, full of nervous energy, nostrils flaring with curiosity. Jamie reached out a hand, and the little brown pony snuffled his palm, searching for treats. Jamie laughed quietly, amazed at how quickly they were beginning to trust him. Just 48 hours ago, they were wild-eyed and panicked, and now there was hope, glimmering beneath the fear. He spent the next hour tending to the ponies, cleaning their wounds as gently as he could. Ash, proud and strong, let Jamie change the bandages on his foreleg, flinching only once. Bracken nibbled at his sleeve, impatient for attention, while Willow, shy but sweet, stood quietly, her big brown eyes following his every move. Jamie talked to them as he worked, sometimes just a stream of nonsense, sometimes stories about his mother's favorite horse, or memories of riding along these very hills as a child. With each word, each small act of care, Jamie felt the boundaries between himself and the ponies melt away. He realized, with something close to wonder, that he was forming a bond. Not just the sort of surface connection you make with an animal in passing, but something deeper, something that gave both parties a sense of purpose. After tending to their wounds and refilling their water, Jamie sat on an overturned bucket in the sun, just watching the ponies explore their new world. The farm was still in ruins, fences broken, the barn roof sagging, tools rusted from years of neglect. But with Ash, Bracken, and Willow there, it felt less empty. He found himself thinking not about what he'd lost, but about what he might still build. He decided to call his old friend Rob, who ran a hardware store in the nearest village. "Rob, I need some advice, and maybe a few favors," Jamie said, explaining the state of the barn and the new arrivals. Rob didn't hesitate. "You know I'm always game to lend a hand, mate. Let's get that place sorted." True to his word, Rob showed up an hour later with a truck full of lumber, nails, and a can-do attitude. The two men worked side by side, repairing the worst sections of the fence and shoring up the barn door, laughter and old stories floating between the clatter of hammers and the whir of drills. Ash watched them carefully, head poking out over the stall, while Bracken pranced along the fence line, clearly enjoying the commotion. Willow, still wary, stayed in the corner of the paddock, but even she couldn't resist peeking over at the men now and then. By mid-afternoon, Jamie's muscles burned with a pleasant ache, the kind that only comes from real, honest work. He took a break, sitting on the grass beside the ponies. Rob joined him, handing over a cold soda. "They're fine animals, these three," Rob said, nodding. "Looks like they're just as lucky to have you as you are to have them." Jamie stared at the ponies, something softening in his chest. "I think I needed them more than I knew," he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. He didn't say the rest, that he'd felt lost since coming home, or that the silence of the farm was sometimes more suffocating than any battlefield. He didn't need to. Rob clapped him on the shoulder, understanding passing between them without another word. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of activity. The vet returned, bringing salve for the wounds and a handful of sugar cubes for the ponies. Jamie watched as Willow, sweet, timid Willow, finally took a treat from the vet's hand. It was a tiny victory, but one that brought a grin to everyone's face. That evening, after Rob left, Jamie took a walk through the fields with Ash at his side. The pony walked with a slight limp, but kept pace, ears flicking back and forth as if listening to the secrets of the wind. Jamie told Ash about Afghanistan, about the friends he missed, about the fear that sometimes crept in at night when the world was too quiet. Ash listened, patient and silent. Jamie felt tears prick his eyes, but he kept talking, words tumbling out with the ease that comes from knowing you're not being judged. For the first time in months, Jamie felt the weight in his chest begin to lighten. Back at the barn, Bracken and Willow were waiting, both clearly eager for dinner. Jamie served up oats and fresh water, smiling as the ponies jostled for the best spot at the trough. When Willow shied away, Ash nudged her gently, making space. Jamie watched this small act of kindness and felt a wave of pride. His herd was learning, healing, becoming a family. As darkness fell, Jamie sat in the doorway of the barn, the ponies bedded down behind him. He listened to the night sounds, the distant call of an owl, the soft snort of a sleeping pony, the rustle of wind through the trees. There was a peace here he hadn't felt in years, a sense of belonging he'd thought he'd lost forever. But as he closed his eyes, letting exhaustion pull him towards sleep, a single thought crept in. What if someone came looking for the ponies? What if they weren't safe here after all? Jamie promised himself he'd protect them no matter what. In the hush of the barn, surrounded by trust he'd fought hard to earn, Jamie realized that maybe, just maybe, his own journey of healing had finally begun. The next few days passed in a strange, hopeful rhythm. Jamie rose with the sun, his hands and shirt soon stained with the honest work of caring for his unlikely herd. Ash's limp improved with every careful cleaning and fresh bandage. Bracken's energy grew wilder by the hour, and Willow, gentle, anxious Willow, finally allowed Jamie to brush the tangles from her mane without shying away. There were moments, sitting on the splintered fence with a mug of tea, when Jamie almost forgot the ache of war and grief that still haunted his sleep. But a question kept gnawing at him, a knot in his stomach that tightened every time he watched the ponies graze on the ragged field. Where had they come from? Who would leave animals to suffer at the edge of a ruined farm? One morning, as Jamie mucked out the barn, something sharp caught his attention beneath the old straw. He reached down, fingers closing around a scrap of dirty yellow plastic, half buried, frayed at the edges. He wiped it clean against his jeans and squinted in the dusty sunlight. The piece was stamped with a black label, BEGR, Batch 0. Jamie frowned. The letters meant nothing at first, but something about the cold, clinical code set his nerves on edge. He studied the barn floor, then combed through the hay, searching for any other signs. Near the back wall, he found another small tag, this one twisted around a broken strand of wire, the same kind he'd cut from the pony's legs that first night. He slipped both tags into his pocket, mind churning. BEGR! Why did that sound familiar? Jamie hurried to the farmhouse, heart pounding, and sat down at his father's battered old desk. The drawers were filled with faded bills, postcards, and a lifetime of odd receipts. After a long search, he found a battered leather folder labeled Thornton Farm, Legal. Inside were contracts, correspondence, and a sheaf of notes in his father's tidy handwriting. He read through them, lips pressed tight. A chill ran down his spine as he recognized the same BEGR stamp, now in the letterhead of a glossy pamphlet. The cover declared, BEGR Breeding Excellence, Guaranteed Results, for a Better Future. Jamie's stomach twisted. The folder included a purchase agreement for a small herd of Exmoor ponies, dated a year before his father's death. Attached was a memo. If animals do not meet standard, return to supplier for disposal or cull. Batch numbers must be reported. Jamie stared at the words, feeling sick. Disposal. Cull. He read the memo again, anger rising in his chest. He thought about the scars on Ash's legs, the terror in Willow's eyes, Bracken's skittishness. Someone had tried to get rid of them, quietly, with no one the wiser. His father must have found out, Jamie realized. Maybe that was why he'd never spoken of these ponies, or the contract, in his last months. He laid out the documents, photos, and tags on the kitchen table. For the first time, Jamie saw a pattern. The same BEGR code appeared on every page. There were references to non-compliant stock, breeding failures, and batch retrieval teams. His fists clenched. These ponies weren't just unlucky strays. They were the unwanted leftovers of a business that saw them as nothing more than numbers. Jamie's anger simmered as he paced the kitchen, back and forth, trying to decide what to do next. Should he call the company and demand answers? Was it even safe to confront them directly? For a moment, the old habits from his soldiering days took over, analyzing risks, mapping contingencies, bracing for confrontation. he decided to do something he rarely did: ask for help. He called Rob first, explaining what he'd found. "That's not right, mate," Rob said, his voice sharp. "You should talk to the authorities, and maybe don't mention your name to BEGR just yet. Sounds like they've got something to hide." Jamie nodded, heart racing. He tucked the folder into his backpack and grabbed his phone, snapping photos of every document and every tag. Then, on a hunch, he returned to the barn to search for more clues. As he dug through a pile of rotting pallets, his hand closed on another tangle of wire, this time with a metal tag attached. He brushed off the dirt and read the stamped letters. BEGR. Again. It was more than enough. Jamie took a deep breath and headed out, locking the ponies safely in the barn with a promise. "I'll be back soon. No one's going to hurt you. Never again." The village was a short drive away, winding along narrow lanes beneath low gray clouds. Jamie stopped at the post office and printed the photos he'd taken, tucking them into the folder with the rest of the evidence. Then he walked to the police station, a plain brick building on the edge of the green. Inside, a receptionist looked up from her computer, surprised to see someone at the counter so early. "Can I help you?" "I hope so," Jamie replied, voice steady. "I need to talk to someone about animal cruelty. And I think there's something bigger going on. A company, BEGR, and illegal dumping." The woman nodded, picking up the phone. Within minutes, Jamie was ushered into a small interview room, where a detective with kind eyes and a lined face introduced himself as Inspector David Keene. Jamie explained everything: how he'd found the ponies, the state they'd been in, the tags, the contract, and the company's cold language of disposal. Inspector Keene listened in silence, taking notes and examining every piece of evidence. He asked a few pointed questions about the condition of the animals, their injuries, and how long Jamie had been caring for them. "These documents are damning," Keene said at last. "You've done the right thing, Mr. Thornton. We'll open an investigation into BEGR, and I'd suggest you keep your animals out of sight for now, at least until we know more." Jamie felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. Someone in authority was finally listening, but he couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get more dangerous. If BEGR had gone to such lengths to hide their cruelty, what else might they do to protect their secrets? He thanked Inspector Keene and headed home, his mind racing with possibilities. Along the way, he bought extra locks for the barn and a bag of carrots for the ponies. When he arrived, Ash, Bracken, and Willow greeted him at the gate, snuffling for treats, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing beyond the hills. That night, Jamie slept lightly, a baseball bat beside his bed and the folder of evidence hidden under his pillow. The wind battered the farmhouse, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, a reminder that danger was never far away. But in the morning, Jamie's resolve was ironclad. He was no longer just a caretaker. He was a protector, an advocate, and, if it came to it, a fighter. The ponies were depending on him now. He wouldn't let them down. And as the sun rose over Thornton Farm, golden light spilling across the battered fields, Jamie whispered a silent promise to the animals grazing in the mist. "No one's ever going to hurt you again. Not while I'm still breathing." Jamie spent the next few days in a constant state of watchfulness. Every sound at the gate made his muscles tense. Every vehicle crawling past on the distant country road had him peering through the curtain. Ash, Bracken, and Willow sensed it too. Ash growing protective, Willow skittish, Bracken more restless than ever. The farm felt like a fortress under siege, even as the June sun warmed the hills and filled the paddocks with golden light. Jamie checked the locks on the barn for the third time that morning, feeling the smooth metal under his fingers. His phone buzzed with a message from Inspector Keene. "We've begun inquiries with BEGR. We'll update if anything urgent comes up. Please stay cautious." Jamie read the words twice, then slipped the phone into his pocket. Heart pounding. He tried to keep up the daily routine, feeding, mucking out, brushing tangled manes, but a shadow lingered behind every action. In the evenings, he sat with the ponies in the fading light, talking to them quietly, as if his calm voice could shield them from whatever trouble was coming. The trouble arrived on a Wednesday afternoon, with a sudden knock at the farmhouse door. Jamie froze in the hallway, hand instinctively reaching for the baseball bat he'd propped behind the door. He opened the door just a crack, peering out. A tall, angular man stood on the porch, dressed in an expensive suit that looked out of place against the muddy gravel and peeling paint of Thornton Farm. Behind him, a sleek black car idled at the edge of the drive. "Mr. Thornton, I presume," the man said, flashing a businesslike smile. "Nigel Hargreaves. I represent BEGR." His voice was smooth, practiced, too polite to be friendly. Jamie stepped outside, closing the door firmly behind him. He kept his expression neutral. "What can I do for you?" Nigel glanced around, his gaze lingering on the barn and the paddocks beyond. "We're here on company business. You recently came into possession of 3 Exmoor ponies, batch 09A, I believe. I'm afraid those animals are company property. I'll need you to return them." Jamie's pulse spiked. He forced himself to breathe, arms crossed over his chest. "Those ponies were found trapped in wire on my land, injured, abandoned. If they're yours, you've got some explaining to do." Nigel's smile never faltered. "There's been a misunderstanding. Sometimes stock escapes during transport. The company is quite diligent about animal welfare. Please just hand them over and we'll ensure their proper care." Jamie's anger flared, but he kept his voice steady. "Proper care. They'd be dead if I hadn't found them. I've spoken to the authorities, shared evidence, photos, vet reports. Until this is sorted, those ponies stay right here." The mask slipped from Nigel's face for a split second, eyes narrowing, lips pressed thin. "Mr. Thornton, I must warn you, refusing to comply could have legal consequences. BEGR has a contract. Those animals are not yours." Jamie felt the old combat readiness kick in, a calm, icy clarity. "If you want to try, bring your lawyers, but I don't respond to threats on my doorstep." A tense silence hung between them, broken only by a gust of wind rattling the loose gutter above the porch. In the distance, Ash let out a whinny, sharp and insistent. Nigel turned his head toward the barn, then back to Jamie. "I suggest you reconsider," Nigel said softly, menace coiled beneath his words. "BEGR isn't in the habit of letting assets slip away." Jamie didn't flinch. "Then maybe it's time someone made a habit of standing up to you." Nigel straightened his tie, forced a smile. "We'll be in touch." Without another word, he walked briskly to his car, the engine growling as it disappeared down the lane. Jamie stayed on the porch long after the car had vanished, fists clenched so tightly his knuckles ached. Every part of him buzzed with adrenaline, dread, and something close to grim satisfaction. The confrontation was inevitable, and now it was out in the open. He went straight to the barn, where the ponies milled anxiously. Ash stood in front of the others, as if sensing the danger. Jamie knelt in the straw, arms around the big gray's neck, whispering quietly. "Don't worry, big guy. I'm not letting anyone take you away. Not now. not ever. That evening, Jamie called Inspector Keene. He described Nigel's visit in detail, relaying every word, every threat. The inspector's tone grew sharper. "You did the right thing, Jamie. BEGR's legal team is aggressive. They'll try to intimidate you. I'll log the encounter. If they come back, don't engage. Call us right away." Jamie thanked him, the tension settling in his shoulders like a heavy coat. He double-checked every lock, every window. He even rigged up a motion sensor on the barn door, a trick he'd picked up overseas. Word of the confrontation traveled fast. By the next morning, Rob was at the farm, armed with strong coffee and a box of old security cameras from his shop. "We'll wire the place up proper," he declared, helping Jamie install cameras at the gate, barn, and porch. "If BEGR tries anything sneaky, we'll have proof." For the ponies, life seemed to go on, grazing, nuzzling, sharing the small joys of sun and wind. But Jamie could see the change. Ash slept lighter, Willow startled at the smallest sound, and even Bracken, usually so brash, stuck close to the barn at dusk. Late one night, as Jamie sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea, he spotted headlights on the far road, just for a moment, then gone. His phone buzzed again. "Rob. Saw the same car near the village tonight. Be careful, mate." Jamie closed the blinds, checked the locks once more, and sat by the window, watching the quiet shadows. He didn't know what BEGR would do next, but he knew one thing for sure. No matter what happened, he was ready to fight for Ash, Bracken, and Willow. For the first time in years, the purpose in his chest burned bright and clear. The farm might be battered, but his resolve was unbreakable. Outside, the wind shifted, and in the barn, 3 ponies slept safe, protected by a soldier who'd finally found something worth coming home for. The early light filtered through Jamie's window, chasing away the last remnants of a fitful sleep. He stared at the ceiling for a moment, letting the silence settle in his bones before dragging himself out of bed. The events of yesterday replayed in his mind. The cold arrogance in Nigel Hargreaves's eyes, the sharp edge of every word, the way the ponies huddled close after sensing the tension. Jamie felt the pressure building inside him, like a storm about to break. He dressed quickly and stepped outside, where the fields glistened with dew and the world was quiet except for the distant calls of wood pigeons. The ponies were up already, Ash poking his head over the fence, Willow grazing in the soft grass, Bracken kicking up his heels, chasing shadows. Jamie smiled despite everything. "Good morning," he called, the words gentle, letting his voice settle the herd. Breakfast and bandages came first. Jamie worked with practiced care, his movements sure and steady, the old routines bringing comfort. Ash accepted his touch with trust. Bracken nuzzled his jacket for treats. Willow allowed herself to be brushed, even leaning into Jamie's hand for the first time. These small victories felt huge in the quiet tension of the farm. But as the sun climbed higher, so did Jamie's anxiety. The conversation with Inspector Keene echoed in his head. "Don't engage. Call us right away." The warning felt heavy, a reminder that he wasn't alone in this fight, but also that the stakes were rising. He gathered his folder of evidence, double-checked the photos of the ponies' injuries, and printed out copies of every document he'd found in his father's desk. Then he drove into the village, winding through green lanes until the brick face of the police station came into view. Jamie parked, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. Inspector David Keene was waiting for him in a small, sunlit office. The detective's lined face broke into a reassuring smile as Jamie entered. "Morning, Jamie. Come in. I've got some time for you." Jamie handed over the folder, explaining again about BEGR, the tags, the contract, and Nigel's threat. Inspector Keene read every page carefully, nodding, his brow furrowing deeper as he turned over each document. "They don't mince words, do they?" he murmured, eyes lingering on the line about disposal or cull. "Batch numbers must be reported." "I've seen a lot of livestock contracts in my time," the inspector said finally. "But this is cold. And those injuries? They're evidence, Jamie. Not just of neglect, but deliberate cruelty." Jamie's jaw tightened. "I knew it wasn't right. I just couldn't prove it until now." Inspector Keene tapped his pen on the table. "I'm opening a formal investigation. I'll need a vet's statement about their condition, and I'll take statements from you and your friend Rob, too. I'll also want to photograph the ponies and the tags myself. It's a start." A sense of relief, sharp and fragile, flickered inside Jamie. What if they come back? What if BEGR tries something before you can stop them? The inspector's eyes hardened. "If anyone from BEGR sets foot on your property without a warrant, you call us immediately. I'll put a car on patrol in the area, and I'll call animal welfare. The law's on your side. For now." Jamie nodded, feeling the weight in his chest shift just a little. He agreed to meet Keene at the farm the next morning for photos and statements. Before he left, he hesitated, then asked, "Inspector, have you ever seen a case like this before? A company just dumping animals like rubbish?" Keene shook his head, voice quiet. "Not here. But times are changing. Sometimes all it takes is one person to stand up and force the truth into the light." Jamie drove home slowly, mind racing. The fields blurred past, but his focus was sharp. Every detail of the evidence, every face he'd met, every small step that brought the truth closer. He wondered if BEGR already knew the police were involved. He wondered what they'd do next. When he arrived, Rob's truck was already parked in the drive. Rob was in the barn, checking the security camera feed on his tablet. "No sign of trouble," Rob said. "But I'm staying tonight, just in case. You can't fight these bastards alone." Jamie managed a grateful smile. "You sure? You've got your own family." Rob shrugged, clapping Jamie on the back. "My wife sent me, said you needed backup, and she's right. You saved those ponies, mate. We're not letting them or you down." They spent the afternoon hard at work. Rob ran wires for another camera. Jamie reinforced the barn door with new planks. The ponies watched with quiet interest. Bracken darting in and out, Ash standing guard by Willow's side. The sense of purpose united them, pulling Jamie out of the fog of anxiety and back into the present. Late in the day, the vet returned for a checkup. She spent extra time with Willow, who'd been slow to eat that morning. The vet's tone was gentle, but her words were crisp. "They're healing, but there's trauma here, physical and emotional. I'll write a full report for the inspector. And Jamie, don't let anyone pressure you. These animals are safe with you." As evening fell, Jamie and Rob sat outside, mugs of tea warming their hands. They watched the sun set behind the hills, the light painting the farm gold and pink. For a little while, it felt almost peaceful. But just after dark, headlights swept the far end of the lane. Jamie and Rob exchanged glances, tension crackling in the air. The car slowed near the gate, idled for a moment, then drove on without stopping. Jamie's fists clenched. "They're watching." Rob's eyes were grim. "Let them watch. We're ready." That night, Jamie hardly slept. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against the shutters set his nerves on edge. He paced from window to window, checking locks, peering out at the barn where his charges rested. At midnight, he stood beneath the stars, listening to the quiet breaths of the ponies inside. The farm was surrounded by darkness, but Jamie felt a new resolve blooming in his chest. By dawn, exhaustion mixed with determination. Inspector Keene arrived with a camera and notebook, careful not to spook the ponies. He took photos of Ash's scars, Willow's thin frame, the BEGR tags. He listened to Jamie and Rob's statements, eyes sharp behind his glasses. "Thank you for your courage," Keene said quietly when he finished. "I'll update you as soon as there's news. And Jamie, don't let them scare you off. Most folks would have turned away. You did the right thing." When Keene left, Jamie stood in the yard, watching the inspector's car disappear down the lane. The farm was quiet, the ponies grazing under a pale sky. For the first time in weeks, Jamie felt the faint stirrings of hope, fragile maybe, but real. He walked back to the barn, pausing to stroke Ash's mane, to scratch Bracken behind the ears, to offer Willow a handful of clover. "We're not alone anymore," he whispered, voice thick. "No one's going to take you. Not now. Not ever." He didn't know what the coming days would bring, but he knew one thing for certain. Together, with his friends, with the law, and with the strength he'd found in the eyes of 3 battered ponies, they'd face whatever storm came next. And for the first time, Jamie believed that maybe, just maybe, justice was on their side. The threat from BEGR still lingered at the edge of every thought, but in the bright mornings that followed Inspector Keene's visit, Jamie threw himself into caring for Ash, Bracken, and Willow with a new sense of purpose. If the law was finally on their side, then maybe, just maybe, he could do more than keep the ponies safe. Maybe he could give them a chance at a real life. Training began in earnest. Jamie set his alarm for dawn, rising before the sky changed from velvet blue to pale gold. The ponies watched as he set up makeshift obstacles in the paddock. An old barrel here, a low rail there, faded cones that had once marked football boundaries, now serving a new purpose. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start. Ash was the first to step forward. Tall and steady, he carried himself with a gravity that reminded Jamie of the horses he'd known in childhood. Jamie spoke to him quietly, his tone calm, each movement slow and deliberate. "Let's see what you remember, big guy," he said, holding out a halter. Ash hesitated only a moment before lowering his head and allowing Jamie to slip the halter over his ears. His trust was hard-won, the result of careful attention and hours spent side by side. Jamie led him around the paddock, practicing halts and gentle turns, praising every small success. Ash responded with patience, occasionally pausing to sniff Jamie's pocket for a treat. Bracken was a different story altogether. From the first moment, he was everywhere at once, darting behind Ash, tossing his mane, testing the boundaries with quick, playful kicks. Jamie laughed, surprised by how much joy the little brown pony brought into the routine. "All right, troublemaker, your turn," he said, holding up the halter. Bracken eyed it warily, then bolted across the paddock in a flurry of hooves and snorts. Jamie shook his head, biting back a smile. He knew that forcing things would only make matters worse. Instead, he sat on the grass and waited, letting Bracken's curiosity get the better of him. After a few minutes, the pony trotted over, sniffing Jamie's boots, then nudging his shoulder as if to say, "I'm ready now." The halter slipped on easily, and soon Bracken was prancing at Jamie's side, eager for every challenge. Willow, gentle and reserved, presented the greatest challenge. She lingered at the edge of the paddock, watching her companions, flinching at sudden movements or loud voices. Jamie spent hours just being near her, reading aloud from an old book, humming the songs his mother once sang, never rushing, never pushing. He left the halter nearby, allowing Willow to investigate it at her own pace. Slowly, day by day, she edged closer. When she finally nudged the halter with her nose, Jamie held his breath. "That's it, sweetheart," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. On the fourth morning, Willow let Jamie slip the halter over her head. She shivered, but didn't pull away. Jamie guided her a few steps, his hand gentle on her shoulder, the two of them moving together like a slow dance. Willow's trust was fragile, a delicate thing, but it grew with every quiet success. As the days turned into a week, Jamie established a rhythm, training in the morning, chores in the afternoon, quiet moments in the evenings spent grooming and tending to each pony. He learned their quirks, Ash's stubborn streak, Bracken's need for games, Willow's silent gratitude. In return, the ponies began to rely on Jamie in their own ways, following him from the barn to the field and back again. Word of Jamie's efforts spread beyond Thornton Farm. Rob shared a video of Ash navigating a homemade obstacle course, his steps confident and sure, Bracken watching enviously from the fence. The clip found its way onto social media, where comments flooded in, some from animal lovers offering advice, others sharing stories of rescued ponies and second chances. Jamie read them late at night, heart swelling with pride and a touch of disbelief. Maybe the world wasn't as cold as he'd thought. One afternoon, as Jamie brushed Willow in the sun, a car pulled into the drive. He tensed instinctively, but relaxed when he saw Inspector Keene step out, followed by a woman with a kind smile and a leather-bound notebook. "This is Lillian," Keene explained. "She works with a therapy program for children. She wanted to meet your ponies." Jamie led them to the paddock, his nerves jangling. Lillian moved slowly, speaking in soft tones, her eyes kind and patient. She watched Ash's careful obedience, laughed at Bracken's antics, and knelt quietly beside Willow, who edged forward, curious but cautious. Lillian's gaze met Jamie's. "You've done remarkable work," she said. "I'd love to talk about Willow joining our program. She has a gentleness about her. Sometimes the quietest ponies help the quietest children." Jamie's throat tightened with emotion. He hadn't imagined any future for Willow beyond safety and peace. Now, a new possibility shimmered just out of reach, one where these ponies might heal not just themselves, but others. After Lillian left, Jamie watched the ponies graze in the fading light. He felt the old weight in his chest begin to lift, replaced by hope. Brittle, but stronger every day. In the simple rituals of training, in every moment of patience and every little victory, Jamie felt himself healing, too. That night, he sat on the porch with Rob, watching the stars spark above the hills. "I think we're finally turning a corner," Jamie said, his voice steady. Rob grinned. "They're lucky to have you, mate." Jamie shook his head. "No, I think I'm the lucky one." In the barn, Ash nickered softly. Bracken tossed his head in a dream, and Willow slept curled in the straw. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. BEGR wasn't finished. Jamie could feel it. But for now, in the gentle hush of a Yorkshire night, Jamie let himself believe in second chances. He whispered a promise to the darkness. "We're not giving up. Not ever." Jamie never expected his story, and that of Ash, Bracken, and Willow, to spread beyond the worn fences of Thornton Farm. But as summer unfurled across Yorkshire, the world seemed to open its arms to his unlikely herd. What began with a simple video on Rob's social media, Ash weaving through barrels, Bracken's mischievous leap, Willow shyly accepting a carrot, soon rippled through the village and beyond, gathering momentum like a gathering storm. At first, Jamie didn't even notice. He was too busy with chores, mending fences, and leading early morning training sessions in the dew-damp paddock. But one morning, as he sipped coffee on the porch, his phone buzzed non-stop with new messages, notifications, and friend requests from names he'd never seen before. Rob burst into the yard, face flushed with excitement. "Jamie, mate, you're famous! Look, Yorkshire Ponies is trending!" Jamie blinked, staring at his phone. The video had been shared thousands of times, attracting comments from animal lovers, veterans, and people all over the country. Stories poured in. People who'd rescued animals or found comfort in the presence of a horse during dark times. Someone created a petition demanding a full investigation into BEGR's practices. Another shared a news clip about animal cruelty in the breeding industry, tagging Jamie and Thornton Farm. What struck Jamie most weren't the numbers or the hashtags, but the words of support, sometimes from total strangers, sometimes from people he hadn't heard from in years. A retired schoolteacher wrote, "Thank you for standing up for those who can't speak." A little girl's message simply read, "I love Willow." Soon, the local newspaper called, asking for an interview. At first, Jamie hesitated, uncomfortable in the spotlight. But Rob and Inspector Keene both urged him to speak up, if only to put pressure on BEGR and make sure the story wouldn't be buried. Jamie agreed, inviting the young reporter and a photographer to the farm one bright afternoon. The reporter listened closely as Jamie described that first night. The ponies tangled in wire, the fear in their eyes, the long days spent earning trust. She asked about the BEGR tags, about the threats from Nigel, about what it meant to stand up for creatures others had abandoned. Jamie answered honestly, his voice steady, every word shaped by the bond he'd built with Ash, Bracken, and Willow. The article ran a week later, its headline impossible to miss. "Veteran rescues ponies, stands up to corporate cruelty. A Yorkshire farm fights back." The story included photos of the ponies, the barn, and Jamie kneeling beside Willow, sunlight catching the tears he tried to hide. The piece struck a chord, and soon television reporters came calling, eager for a glimpse of the man and his animals. With every new mention, the outcry against BEGR grew louder. A local radio host devoted an entire segment to animal welfare, urging listeners to sign the petition and send letters to their MPs. Volunteers arrived at Thornton Farm with bales of hay, bags of oats, and handmade treats. Someone left a knitted blanket with the words, "Safe at last," stitched in bright blue thread. Even as Jamie marveled at the outpouring of support, he felt the tension ratchet tighter. Not everyone was happy. One afternoon, he found a note shoved under the farmhouse door. "Give up the ponies before it's too late." No signature, just the echo of Nigel's threat. Jamie's blood ran cold, but he refused to show fear. He called Inspector Keene, who promised to send extra patrols and log the note as evidence. Despite the unease, the atmosphere around the farm changed in ways Jamie never expected. Families stopped by to visit the ponies, children giggling as Bracken chased after a tossed apple or Willow allowed careful strokes down her nose. One day, Lillian brought a small group from her therapy program. Jamie watched as Willow, tentative at first, let a boy in a wheelchair brush her mane. The boy's laughter rang out, clear and bright, filling the barn with a new kind of hope. Through it all, Jamie's bond with Ash grew stronger. The big gray pony followed him everywhere, a silent guardian. Some nights, Jamie found himself sitting in the paddock long after sunset, telling Ash stories from his past, about his mother, about Afghanistan, about the strange, winding road that had led them both here. Sometimes, when Jamie's voice caught, Ash would nuzzle his shoulder, solid and warm. As the pressure mounted, BEGR tried to push back. Their lawyers sent threatening letters, citing contracts, demanding the return of their assets, warning of financial ruin if Jamie didn't comply. But every legal threat was met with louder community support. When word spread that BEGR planned to send a team to collect the ponies, volunteers formed a watch group, taking turns to keep an eye on the gates at night. Rob installed more security cameras, and local businesses donated motion-activated lights and even an alarm system. The village, once wary of getting involved, now rallied around Jamie and his herd. The pub hosted a Ponies Protection Night, raising money for legal fees. The baker delivered fresh bread and pastries, and the local vet offered checkups for free. Inspector Keene visited more often, sometimes just to walk the fields and check the locks. "You've got the whole county watching now, Jamie," he said with a wry smile. "BEGR's not going to get away with this in the dark." But Jamie knew the fight wasn't over. Some nights, headlights still lingered on the road, and the ponies grew restless, huddling closer to the barn. Each threat, each new letter from BEGR's lawyers, was a reminder that their enemies were powerful and determined. Even so, Jamie drew strength from the people standing with him. Every hashtag, every message, every knock at the door was a promise that they were not alone. The farm, once a place of silence and loss, now buzzed with life, laughter, and hope. In the faces of neighbors, in the touch of children's hands, in the steady companionship of Ash, Bracken, and Willow, Jamie found the courage to keep going. He stood at the gate one evening, watching the last of the day's visitors wave goodbye, and whispered into the fading light, "We're not backing down. Not now, not ever." As dusk settled over Yorkshire, Jamie realized that the greatest power wasn't in lawyers or contracts, but in the hearts of those who cared enough to fight. The tension in the village hung heavy, a storm waiting to break. Even the air felt charged. Everyone knew something was coming, though no one could say when or how. Jamie kept up his routine, but each day his eyes flickered to the gate a little more often. He checked the cameras, walked the fence lines, and watched the sun rise and fall with a knot in his chest. The ponies sensed it too. Ash, usually calm, paced the paddock at night, ears pricked to every sound. Bracken stuck close to Willow, who barely left Jamie's side. It was a Friday when the storm finally hit. Jamie woke to the distant sound of engines on the lane, more than just a single car. The kind of convoy that brought memories rushing back, of military operations, of the weight of responsibility, of fight or flight pressed hard into his bones. He was at the barn in seconds, boots crunching on gravel, the baseball bat clutched in one hand. From the kitchen window, Rob called out, "Jamie, they're here!" 3 black vans and a silver SUV rolled to a stop outside the gate, dust swirling around their tires. Out stepped Marcus Finch, the head of BEGR's retrieval team, a broad-shouldered man in a tailored suit, his face set in a permanent scowl. Behind him, 4 burly men in corporate uniforms, radios clipped to their belts, spread out along the fence line. Nigel Hargreaves was there too, a smug smile on his lips, arms crossed. "Mr. Thornton," Marcus called, voice booming across the yard. "We're here for company property. Stand aside." Jamie felt the heat rise in his chest. He stood firm, blocking the entrance to the paddock. "These ponies are not property. You abandoned them, left them to die. You're not taking them." Nigel stepped forward, holding a thick folder, no doubt full of contracts and legal threats. "This isn't a negotiation, Mr. Thornton. The law is clear." Jamie's phone vibrated in his pocket. Rob had already texted Inspector Keane and the village watch group. From the corner of his eye, Jamie saw headlights pulling in behind the BEGR convoy. Villagers, friends, and even some strangers who'd seen the news and come to help. They spilled onto the lane, blocking the road with their cars and bodies, a wall of silent support. Marcus sneered. "You're making a mistake, Thornton. You think these people can protect you. You think a crowd and a few social media posts matter." Jamie's voice was steady, loud enough for everyone to hear. "They matter more than you ever will. You want to hurt these animals. You'll have to go through all of us." As if on cue, Ash let out a sharp, piercing whinny, a call echoed by Bracken and Willow. The ponies moved as one, standing behind Jamie, heads high, eyes blazing with trust and defiance. One of the BEGR men moved toward the gate, hands reaching for the latch. Jamie stepped forward, bat ready. "Take one more step and you'll answer to every soul in Yorkshire, starting with me." Before the standoff could explode, a siren wailed in the distance. The crowd parted as Inspector Keane's police cruiser skidded to a halt. He emerged, notepad in one hand, eyes blazing with purpose. Two officers followed, taking up positions at either end of the lane. "Everybody step back," Keane ordered, voice crackling through the morning air. "BEGR, I have a warrant for your company records and a court order prohibiting you from removing any animals from this property until our investigation is complete. If you attempt to do so, you will be detained for interfering with an active case." Marcus's face twisted with disbelief. Nigel tried to protest, waving his folder, but Keane cut him off. "Save it for your lawyers, Mr. Hargreaves. You can come down to the station and make a statement if you like, but you are not taking anything from this farm today." A murmur ran through the crowd, quickly swelling into cheers and clapping. Someone started chanting, "Save the ponies!" Rob fist-pumped the air. A few villagers wiped tears from their eyes. For the first time since all this began, Jamie felt the power of the community not just as support, but as a shield. Marcus, red-faced and furious, barked at his men to retreat. The uniformed BEGR team backed away from the fence, muttering under their breath. As they packed up their vans, Jamie locked eyes with Nigel, seeing at last a flicker of doubt crack his smug mask. Inspector Keane approached Jamie, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "They're done for now. We'll get everything on record. You've got a whole county behind you, don't forget it." Jamie swallowed hard, relief and pride mixing in his chest. "Thank you. I couldn't have done any of this alone." "You didn't have to," Keane replied. "Not with all these people behind you, and not with the truth on your side." The crowd lingered, hugging Jamie, feeding carrots to Ash and Bracken, stroking Willow's soft nose. Children posed for photos, volunteers handed out homemade lemonade, and the local baker arrived with a basket of sweet rolls for everyone. It was a celebration of resistance, of justice, of hope. As the sun rose higher, the police took statements, photographed everything, and collected evidence. Keane assured Jamie that BEGR would be held to account, that charges of animal cruelty, abandonment, and intimidation were now in play. The villagers promised to keep watch every night until the investigation was over. Later, as the farm settled into a rare peace, Jamie sat on the grass with the ponies. Ash lay beside him. Bracken rested his head on Jamie's knee, and Willow curled close. her eyes soft with trust. Jamie stroked their manes, feeling the tension finally leave his body. "We did it," he whispered. "You're safe now. You're home." He looked toward the horizon, where the storm had finally broken, and felt, maybe for the first time since coming home, a sense of belonging, not just to the land or to the animals, but to the people who had stood up and refused to let evil win. In that quiet, golden moment, Jamie realized the fight wasn't just about saving 3 ponies. It was about standing for what was right, even when the odds seemed impossible. And in that, they had all triumphed, together. The days that followed the confrontation felt different, lighter, as if the whole farm exhaled. The police kept their word, patrolling the lane and watching the gates, while the investigation into BEGR roared ahead with the force of a river that could no longer be dammed. Newspapers reported every detail. Photos of Ash, Bracken, and Willow standing proud in the morning mist. Interviews with Jamie and villagers. Even grainy snapshots of BEGR's retreat. Marcus and Nigel's angry faces caught forever in the glare of justice. For weeks, Jamie found himself at the center of a whirlwind he'd never asked for. He gave statements, sat for interviews, welcomed more children and neighbors than he could count. Yet beneath the noise, the life he'd built at Thornton Farm deepened. The ponies flourished. Ash grew stronger, his coat regaining its luster. Bracken turned every corner of the paddock into a playground, chasing butterflies and teaching children how to laugh without fear. Willow, gentle as dawn, walked side by side with Jamie, her eyes bright with the promise of trust restored. Justice, when it came, was quiet but final. BEGR was fined, its local operations suspended, and several of its managers, Marcus and Nigel among them, faced charges of animal cruelty, abandonment, and intimidation. The community gathered at the village hall the day the verdict came down. When the news broke, there were cheers, tears, and a sense that, for once, right had triumphed over power. Even the local MP sent a letter, thanking Jamie for his courage and promising new legislation to protect animals from corporate abuse. But for Jamie, victory didn't mean things would ever return to how they were before. It meant starting again, choosing, every day, to build something good from all that had been broken. He stood in the paddock one breezy morning, watching the ponies graze. Ash raised his head, nostrils flaring, and walked over with his usual unhurried dignity. Jamie pressed his forehead to Ash's and closed his eyes, feeling the solid warmth of his friend. "We made it," he whispered. "But you know, this isn't the end for any of us." That summer, Jamie and Ash became fixtures at local fairs and charity events, sharing their story with anyone who would listen. Kids flocked to Ash, brushing his mane, listening with wide-eyed wonder as Jamie described their journey. People brought apples and carrots, but more than that, they brought stories. Tales of their own losses, their own second chances, and the hope that even the most ordinary life can be turned extraordinary with a little courage. Bracken, too, found his place in the world. Lillian, the therapist from the children's program, returned with more groups each week. Bracken became the star of the sessions, his boundless energy and gentle mischief coaxing laughter from children who had forgotten how. He took to the work naturally, nuzzling quiet hands, standing patiently for shy children, and racing alongside those bold enough to run. When Jamie watched Bracken surrounded by smiling faces, he understood the magic his mother had believed in, the quiet, impossible gift that horses bring to wounded hearts. Willow's journey led her even further. After months of gentle training and daily visits from Lillian, Willow was offered a place in a long-term therapy program for children overcoming trauma. Jamie hesitated at first, torn between keeping her close and giving her the chance to heal others. But Willow seemed to know her own mind. She followed Lillian to the trailer with no fear, pausing only to nuzzle Jamie's hand, a silent promise that she was ready for her next chapter. Jamie stood in the lane as the trailer pulled away, pride and sorrow mixing inside him. He waved until Willow disappeared into the distance, then wiped his eyes and turned back to the barn, knowing he had given her, and the children she would help, the greatest gift of all: freedom and a future. Thornton Farm blossomed that autumn. The fields grew lush, fences straightened, and the once empty barn rang with new life. Rescued animals, visitors, and the ever-present laughter of children. Jamie's own scars began to fade, not because the pain was gone, but because he had found something that mattered more: a purpose, a family, and a place in the world he never thought he'd reclaim. People came from all over, drawn by the story of the soldier and the ponies, and left with the sense that kindness can ripple outward in ways no one can predict. Some brought animals of their own, asking for help or simply for hope. Others came just to see Ash, now a living legend in the county, and to thank Jamie for standing up, not only for the voiceless, but for everyone who had ever felt powerless. The farm became more than a home. It became a refuge, a symbol, and a gathering place for those who believed in second chances. On the first day of winter, Jamie hosted a celebration at Thornton Farm, a bonfire, music, stories, and a feast for all. Ash wore a garland of red ribbon, Bracken performed his silly tricks, and Willow's photo hung beside a hand-painted sign: "Every life matters, every story counts." As the stars rose, Jamie looked around at the faces illuminated by firelight. Friends, neighbors, children, and strangers bound together by the journey they'd shared. He raised his mug and spoke, voice clear and steady, carrying over the crackling flames. "We started this year lost, me, Ash, Bracken, and Willow. But what we found together is more than just safety. It's hope and it's family. This farm is proof that no matter how broken things get, there's always a way back. And sometimes the hardest roads lead to the best places. Thank you for standing with us." Cheers erupted, and for a long, beautiful moment, there was only laughter and love, echoing out into the cold night. Jamie slipped away for a moment, walking to the paddock where Ash nuzzled his shoulder. The pony's breath clouded in the frosty air, and Jamie smiled, feeling whole for the first time in years. "We're home," he whispered, "and we always will be."